Look down at the shirt you're wearing right now. It probably just feels like, a completely ordinary piece of everyday clothing. But welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the fascinating 8,000-year global history of the simple plant that made that shirt possible. A plant that literally reshaped the entire world. All right, let's really dive into this because this single thread tells an absolutely epic, sprawling tale. The world came to know it as white gold. And get this unassuming little crop achieved things that marching armies and sharp swords never ever could. It built global empires, it completely destroyed economies, and it fueled both brutal slavery and the ultimate fight for freedom. Over the next few minutes, we'll cover 5 pivotal eras: white gold and its ancient beginnings, the global dominance of Indian textiles, the Industrial Revolution and its dark era, the cotton weapon of freedom, and finally, cotton in the modern economy. Let's unpack exactly how a microscopic fiber dictated global trade. Section 1. White gold, an ancient beginning. Let's start right at the very beginning and trace the microscopic roots of this incredible textile deep into the ancient world. So, picture this. Around 5,000 years ago, while many early European civilizations were still relying on heavy animal skins, just rough, itchy materials to survive the cold, farmers over in the Indus Valley were already weaving these soft, breathable fabrics. The famous Greek historian Herodotus was actually so in awe of this that he wrote about trees that bear wool, surpassing in beauty and in quality the wool of sheep. I mean, he literally thought the Indians had found some kind of magical wool-bearing tree. For a really long time, Western historians believed cotton actually originated in Egypt or the Middle East. But, the Earth rarely keeps its secrets forever. In 1974, excavations kicked off at Mehrgarh in present-day Balochistan. And then, decades later in 2002, a microscopic study of some ancient copper beads found in a grave revealed preserved traces of gossypium, cotton fibers. Now, why does this matter? Well, these discoveries push the known timeline of cotton usage back by a full millennium. It proved that separating seeds from fibers and spinning them wasn't just some basic ancient foraging. No, this was complex engineering, and cotton was likely one of our earliest cash crops. And by the time we get to the Harappan civilization, this skill had just exploded into a massive manufacturing industry. We've actually found silver lids in Mohenjo-daro with the cotton still attached to them, plus thousands of terracotta spindle whorls in places like Lothal and Rakhigarhi. But here's the kicker. Their true mastery wasn't just spinning the thread, it was color. Dyeing cotton is notoriously difficult because the color just wants to wash right out. Yet Harappan artisans figured out advanced techniques utilizing minerals to ensure those vibrant colors stayed fast. Pretty incredible, right? Moving on to Section 2, Global Dominance of Indian Textiles. Let's see how this local mastery completely snowballed into an absolute global monopoly. With the expansion of the Silk Road and Arab maritime routes, Indian textiles totally flooded the Mediterranean. Between the 8th and 13th centuries, the Arab agricultural revolution actually spread cotton seeds and irrigation tech all the way to Spain and Sicily. And the linguistic evolution we see here perfectly maps out the physical journey of those trade routes. Think about it. It went from the Arabic couton to the Spanish algodón and finally to the English cotton. India's ancient legacy was literally shaping European languages as it went. Fast forward to the 17th and 18th centuries, British and Dutch ships started bringing these incredibly colorful, printed Indian calicos back to Europe. And the European elite, they were so tired of heavy linen and wool, they just went absolutely crazy for these light, breathable fabrics. It was a massive craze. In fact, Indian textile dominance was so overwhelming that it began completely wiping out local European weavers. It got so bad that in 1697, London weavers literally rioted in the streets over their market losses. The panic was so severe that the British Parliament stepped in and passed the Calico Acts in 1700 and 1721. They had to completely outlaw the import, the sale, and even the wearing of Indian printed cotton just to protect their own. That brings us to Section 3, Industrial Revolution and Dark Era. This marks a dramatic economic shift, and, to be honest, one of the darkest chapters in our analysis. So, banning Indian textiles wasn't quite enough for Britain. They didn't just need to block it, they needed to replicate its quality. Now, we're often taught that the Industrial Revolution was purely the result of, a burst of European inventive genius. But modern economic historians actually point out that machines like James Hargreaves' spin jenny and Richard Arkwright's water frame were built out of sheer desperation. British weavers simply could not compete with the speed and quality of Indian hand artisans, so they turned to machines to level the playing field. And then, in 1793,
Eli Whitney's cotton gin finally solved the incredibly tedious problem of separating the seeds, which suddenly made mass production viable.
But here is the devastating reality. These new, incredibly fast British machines had a ravenous hunger for raw materials, and that endless hunger birthed a horrific human tragedy. To mass produce all this raw cotton, the American South aggressively expanded its plantation system. By 1860, King cotton made up 75% of all U.S. exports. And we have to be clear, this immense wealth was entirely built on the brutalization and forced labor of over 1.8 million enslaved African Americans working in those fields. And while slavery fueled the supply side over in America, a parallel devastation was unfolding over in India. Consider this absolutely dramatic shift. Around 1750, India accounted for roughly 25% of the entire world's manufacturing, a quarter of it. By 1900, that number had plummeted to just 2%. Let that sink in. This wasn't just a simple loss of market share. It was the systematic, intentional deindustrialization of an ancient manufacturing superpower. So how exactly did it happen so incredibly fast? Well, the East India Company rolled out mechanisms known as the Deodhani and Gomasta systems. Basically, these trapped highly skilled Indian weavers in vicious, inescapable debt cycles. They were heavily taxed, frequently subjected to brutal physical torture, and forced by these systems to sell their goods exclusively to the British at completely submarket rates. After that, the market was flooded with cheap, machine-made British cloth. Entire exquisite crafts just vanished overnight. The legendary Dhaka muslin, which was a 12-meter-long sari spun so incredibly fine that the whole thing could easily pass through a single small ring, was completely wiped out. The specific plant it came from practically went extinct. Which leads us to Section 4, the cotton weapon of freedom. Because, remarkably, from the ashes of this engineered deindustrialization, cotton would surprisingly return to fuel India's ultimate fight for independence. What's truly fascinating here is how deeply interconnected global events really are. When the U.S. Civil War broke out in 1861, Britain suddenly lost its massive supply of slave-picked American cotton. They were facing a severe cotton famine. So what did they do? They desperately turned right back to India. In just a 4-year window, 85 crore rupees in gold and silver flooded into India to buy up cotton exports, creating this massive economic boom over in Bombay. But as soon as the war ended in 1865, the U.S. supply returned, and the Bombay market crashed catastrophically. However, out of the ashes of that ruin, a group of resilient local brokers united to structure their trading. And that group, they formed the Bombay Stock Exchange in 1875. By the time we hit the late 19th century, Indian entrepreneurs had pretty much had enough of these British monopolies. Parsi and Gujarati businessmen started establishing their own modern textile mills in Ahmedabad, which quickly became known as the Manchester of India. And then, when the British partitioned Bengal in 1905, it sparked the Swadeshi movement. The Indian public had a massive realization. The British Empire's true power wasn't its army at all. It was its trade. Across the entire nation, people launched boycotts and started publicly burning foreign, machine-made clothing. Cloth was no longer just fabric. It was the ultimate political symbol. And the crucial point here is how Mahatma Gandhi recognized this exact power. He took a simple wooden spinning wheel, the charkha, and transformed it into a symbol of national duty. He urged every single Indian to spin their own yarn and weave their own cloth, known as khadi. Think about the irony here. The very empire that had used massive industrial machines to crush Indian weavers was suddenly completely powerless against millions of citizens choosing to spin thread by hand. The charkha became such a profound weapon of self-reliance that it earned a central place right on the 1931 Indian National Congress flag. Bringing us to our final chapter, Section 5, Cotton in the Modern Economy. Let's explore exactly how this incredibly resilient industry looks in the modern era following India's hard-won independence. Right after independence in 1947, the new government faced a huge challenge, reviving the industry. They really focused on saving traditional handlooms while simultaneously expanding those modern power looms. Of course, it wasn't always smooth sailing. The industry faced some fierce challenges, especially in the 1970s and 80s, when cheap synthetic polyester fabrics hit the scene and threatened traditional cotton. This actually caused a lot of the historical Bombay mills to shut down completely. But the industry adapted. By the 2000s, the introduction of genetically modified BT cotton brought a massive technological leap, causing agricultural yields to absolutely skyrocket. And today, The Indian cotton industry has experienced nothing short of a miraculous resurrection. India is once again firmly established as one of the top global producers, fiercely competing head-to-head with massive agricultural giants like China and the US. But here is the most remarkable part. Over 250 million Indians, that's 25 crore people, rely on this single industry for their livelihoods today. That 8,000-year-old foundational knowledge, it remains completely unbroken. As we wrap up this explainer, we're left with a really profound realization. Technological leadership and cultural heritage might be temporarily suppressed by brutal policies or the rise and fall of shifting empires, but the foundational knowledge embedded in the DNA of a civilization, that is incredibly hard to destroy. So the very next time you pull on a simple cotton t-shirt, take a second and ask yourself, can foundational knowledge ever truly be erased by temporary suppression? Thank you so much for joining this explainer, and as always, stay curious.